Why the government erased these American towns from the map? What if a town could be wiped off the map, not by a storm or a flood, but by its own government? These aren't just ghost towns. You could almost call them crime scenes. The government has its official story, of course: toxic spills, contamination, public safety. But we're going past the warning signs, because the locals who fled whisper a different, darker secret, something that still haunts the ruins. The real question is, what are they trying to hide? All across the United States, there are holes in the map. Forbidden zones, fenced off and forgotten, where thriving communities once stood. These are places where the American dream rotted from the inside out, leaving behind a poisoned husk. The official story is one of public safety, of necessary condemnations. But when you look closer, a pattern emerges. A pattern of convenience, of cover-ups, and of secrets so dark they've stained the very soil. Today, we're ignoring the warnings and stepping over the no trespassing signs to investigate these modern American ruins. We're going to start with the story they tell you, a story of tragic accidents and environmental decay. And then, we're going to get into the stories they don't want you to hear. The stories of what was left behind, the whispers in the dark, and the chilling paranormal activity that forces us to ask if these towns were just abandoned or if they were intentionally sacrificed. Section 1. The official narrative, a pattern of poison. To understand the lie, you first have to understand the truth they're willing to admit. And that truth is almost always poison. It seeps into the ground, it taints the water, and it fouls the air. It's the perfect, undeniable reason to condemn a place, force families from their homes, and bulldoze a century of history into the dirt. It's a story that plays out time and again, from Oklahoma to Ohio. Our first stop is Pitcher, Oklahoma, a place that feels less like a ghost town and more like the aftermath of a war. If you look at a map today, you'll barely find it. But for most of a century, Pitcher was the beating heart of America's lead and zinc industry. It was a classic boomtown, where families put down roots and men pulled wealth from the earth, fueling the nation's growth. It was a small-town paradise built on American grit. But the industry that gave Pitcher life was also signing its death warrant. For decades, mining companies piled up waste rock, known as chat, into colossal gray mountains that towered over the town. These hills of rubble, containing toxic levels of lead, became playgrounds for generations of kids. The dust blew through the streets, settled on homes, and was breathed in by everyone. The end didn't come with a bang. It was a slow, creeping horror. The water turned acidic, the ground began collapsing into old mine shafts, and worst of all, the children started getting sick. Studies revealed devastatingly high levels of lead in their blood, leading to learning disabilities and lifelong health problems. Pitcher had become one of the most toxic places in America. This is where the government stepped in, not as a savior, but as an undertaker. In the 1980s, the EPA designated the area a Superfund site, a label for the most contaminated land in the nation. For years, they tried to clean up, but the scale of the disaster was just too immense. The poison was everywhere. So they came to a final, brutal solution: erasure. Starting in the 2000s, the government began a massive buyout. They went door to door, offering people money to leave their homes, their history, and their lives behind. It wasn't really a choice, it was an ultimatum. Stay and be poisoned, or take the money and watch your town be demolished. The high school held its final graduation. The churches gave their last sermons. Then the bulldozers came. The final blow came in 2008, when a massive F4 tornado ripped through what was left, as if nature itself was trying to scour the wound clean. Today, walking through Pitcher is surreal. A grid of empty streets leads nowhere. Concrete foundations sit like tombstones in overgrown fields. And on the horizon, the chat piles remain, silent, gray monuments to a toxic legacy. The government says they erased Pitcher to save its people. But the truth is, They erased it to hide a catastrophic failure, the failure of corporations to be responsible, and the failure of the government to protect its citizens until it was far, far too late. This pattern of sudden erasure isn't a relic of the past. It's happening right now. Let's head east, to a small town that until recently was known for its quiet streets and community pride, East Palestine, Ohio. On February 3, 2023, the town's normal life was violently derailed. A Norfolk Southern train carrying hazardous chemicals, including the carcinogen vinyl chloride, careened off the tracks in a fiery hellscape. Fearing a massive explosion, authorities made a decision that would change the town forever: a controlled burn of the chemicals. A massive, toxic black plume rose into the sky, an apocalyptic image, a skull and crossbones flag planted firmly over the town. Residents were evacuated, and when they were told it was safe to return, the story started to break down. The official line from the EPA and the railroad was that the air and water were safe. But residents reported burning eyes, sore throats, and strange rashes. They found creeks filled with dead fish and a chemical sheen that wouldn't wash away. Trust was broken. The town was split between those who accepted the official narrative and those who believed they were living in a slow-motion chemical disaster. While it's not a ghost town yet, East Palestine is a community living in purgatory. The government hasn't issued a full-scale buyout like in Pitcher, but the fear of long-term health effects has created deep uncertainty. It's a town being hollowed out not by bulldozers, but by fear. The government's role here is more subtle. It's not just about the cleanup. It's about controlling the narrative. Every press conference assuring safety, every report minimizing risk, feels to some residents like an attempt to erase their fear and anger. They are trying to rebrand the town, but for many, the only thing they feel is the progress of a poison they can't see, and the cold reality that their home has been sacrificed. Pitcher and East Palestine are two sides of the same coin. One, a slow death from a century of neglect. The other, a sudden, violent trauma. But in both cases, the government's solution was to manage the disaster and, if necessary, condemn the land. It's clean, it's efficient, and it buries the evidence. But what happens when the evidence refuses to stay buried? What happens when the disaster is still alive and burning right under your feet? To find out, we have to go to Pennsylvania. Section 2. The Burning Secret, Centralia, Pennsylvania. Sometimes, the poison isn't from a spill or a factory. Sometimes, it comes from the earth itself, a fire that can't be put out. This is the story of Centralia, Pennsylvania, America's most infamous modern ghost town. Before 1962, Centralia was just another small, tight-knit coal town. It was a place of unlocked doors and community picnics, with generations of families who had worked the rich anthracite coal seams that lay just beneath their homes. The coal built the town, warmed their houses, and paid their bills. They had no idea it would become their funeral pyre. The moment that doomed Centralia came in May of 1962. It began, ironically, with a town cleanup. The council decided to burn the local landfill to clear it out before Memorial Day, a common practice at the time. But the landfill sat in an old strip mine pit, right next to an exposed vein of coal. The fire wasn't put out properly. It crept down into the earth, found that coal seam, and entered the labyrinth of abandoned mine tunnels beneath the town. It was like striking a match in a room full of gasoline. And it began to burn. For years, nobody really understood how bad it was. They spent millions trying to put it out, but nothing worked. The fire was too deep, too vast. Meanwhile, on the surface, life went on. But slowly, terrifyingly, the underworld began to break through. The ground grew warm. Gardens started to steam. Then came the sinkholes. A gas station owner had to remove his fuel tanks when the ground temperature hit over 170 degrees. Then, in 1981, Centralia's story blew up nationally when a 12-year-old boy, Todd Domboski, fell into a sinkhole that suddenly opened in his grandmother's backyard. It was a 150-foot deep chasm of hot mud and lethal carbon monoxide. He only survived by grabbing a tree root as the ground crumbled away. That was the end of denial. The town was sitting on an uncontrollable, underground inferno. In 1983, Congress allocated over $42 million for relocation. It was picture all over again, but with an enemy they couldn't even see. Most residents took the buyout and watched as their neighbors' houses were torn down, one by one. But the government's plan wasn't just relocation, it was total erasure. In 1992, Pennsylvania invoked eminent domain, condemning every property left. The few residents who refused to leave were now legally squatters in their own homes. In 2002, the final insult, the U.S. Postal Service discontinued Centralia's zip code, 17927. Officially, the town was gone. For years, a stretch of Route 61 that ran through town, buckled and broken by the heat, became a bizarre attraction known as the Graffiti Highway. But even that couldn't last. In 2020, the owners buried it under mounds of dirt, wiping the last piece of Centralia's public identity off the map. Today, walking through Centralia is like walking through a ghost. The street grid is still there, an eerie skeleton. But the houses are gone. All that's left are empty lots, a handful of homes for the few residents who won the right to stay, and the smoke. It curls from cracks in the ground, a constant, ghostly reminder of the fires still raging below. A fire scientists say could burn for another 250 years. The official story ends here, a tragic accident, a necessary evacuation. But the official story is never the whole story. Urban explorers and the few who remain tell different tales. They talk of strange radio signals cutting through the airwaves and report seeing figures moving through the toxic fog, shapes that appear and vanish in the haze. The local cemetery is a focal point for these stories, where visitors report an overwhelming sense of sadness and of being watched. Is it just the unsettling vibe of a dead town sitting on an underground fire? Or is something more going on? When a community suffers a trauma this deep, does it leave a scar on the place itself? The government erased Centralia from the map to hide its failure to stop the fire. But did they inadvertently trap something else there? If this journey into America's forbidden zones has you thinking, if you believe there's more to these stories than what we're being told, do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. It tells us you want more investigations like this, more trips into the places and stories that have been deliberately forgotten. It helps us bring you more content that challenges the official narrative. Now, let's go deeper, because Centralia isn't an anomaly. It's a blueprint. Section 3. Echoes in the emptiness, a pattern of haunting. When a town suffers a great trauma, an echo is left behind. And in many of America's forgotten corners, that echo sounds a lot like a scream. The official reasons for abandonment, economic collapse, environmental hazards, never fully explain the feeling you get when you walk their silent streets. The feeling of being an intruder in a place that is still very much occupied. Let's travel to the high desert of California, to a place preserved in a state of arrested decay. This is Bodie. In the late 1800s, Bodie was a wild, booming gold rush town of nearly 10,000 people. A little girl, learning her family was moving there, was said to have prayed, "Goodbye, God, we're going to Bodie." The official story is simple. The gold ran out, the mines closed, and people left. Today, it's a state historic park, with buildings left just as they were, tables set for dinner, goods still on store shelves. A perfect time capsule. But the stories told by park rangers and visitors are much stranger. They speak of the curse of Bodie. Legend says that anyone who takes anything, even a rock or a rusty nail, will be plagued by relentless bad luck until the item is returned. The park's museum keeps binders full of letters from people desperately mailing back their stolen souvenirs, detailing their trails of misfortune. Is it just a clever tale to prevent theft? Maybe. But paranormal claims go deeper. In the J.S. Kane house, rangers have reported the ghost of a Chinese maid who loves children but despises adults. In the Gregory house, people claim to see the ghost of an old woman knitting in her rocking chair. From the abandoned Mendocini house, visitors report the sounds of parties and the smell of Italian food, only to find the building empty and dust-covered. The government preserves Bodie as a museum, but these stories suggest its residents never truly left. Now, let's journey back east to the dense, misty forests of West Virginia, to a town that feels like it was abandoned in a hurry, Thurmond. Nestled in the New River Gorge, Thurmond was once a raucous railroad town, so busy its depots served more passengers than cities like Richmond. But when diesel replaced steam, the town died almost overnight. Today, its population is in the single digits. The National Park Service preserves the town, and the official story is one of simple economic decline. But explorers and paranormal investigators tell a different tale. They describe a heavy, watchful silence. In the old Mencken Cox building, investigators claim to have captured disembodied voices on spirit boxes. On the porch of the Erskine Pugh house, they've recorded banging noises from inside the locked and empty building. One of the most active spots is said to be the old trainmaster's house, where visitors have reported a terrifying feeling of being strangled. In the lower end of town, a collection of derelict houses, people have even claimed to see a swirling black mass. The official history of Thurmond is in books, but its true story seems to be told in whispers, in the dark corners where the spirits of its vibrant, violent past still linger. Finally, we come to a place that represents a different kind of government erasure, slow, agonizing neglect. This is Gary, Indiana. Gary is not a ghost town, people still live here. But it is a city of ghosts, home to one of the highest concentrations of abandoned buildings in the country. Founded in 1906 by U.S. Steel, it was once the city of the century, a powerhouse of American industry. But as the steel industry collapsed, so did Gary. White flight and economic decline caused the population to plummet from a peak of 180,000 to less than 80,000 today. The result is a cityscape that looks like something from a post-apocalyptic film. Crumbling churches stand open to the sky, abandoned schools are filled with decaying books, and entire city blocks are returning to wilderness. The government didn't buy out Gary. They just left it. The erasure here is one of neglect. The dark element isn't a single ghost, but the haunting presence of a dead American dream. Urban explorers report an overwhelming sense of melancholy. Inside the massive, empty shell of the City Methodist Church, the silence is deafening. The paranormal claims here are less about specific spirits and more about the atmosphere of the entire city. It's a collective haunting, the ghost of a prosperous past that now looms over a struggling present. The government didn't need to put up fences around Gary. Economic decay did it for them. So, why did the government erase these American towns from the map? The first answer is the official one and the simplest. To protect people. To contain a toxic spill, move citizens from an underground fire, or prevent slow poisoning from lead-filled soil. It's a narrative of responsibility, a government acting as a reluctant guardian. It's a clean answer for a messy problem. But that's not the whole story. A second, darker possibility is that these towns are erased to hide failure. They are monuments to decades of ignored warnings and corporate neglect. Pitcher is a testament to a mining industry that took the wealth and left the poison. East Palestine is a symbol of a system that prioritizes profit over safety. Centralia is the ultimate icon of a problem ignored until it became an unstoppable catastrophe. From this perspective, erasing the town is easier than admitting failure. Removing it from the map is a way to remove it from the national conscience. It starts to look less like a cleanup and more like a cover-up. And this leads to the third, most unsettling question, the one that lingers in the smoke and shadows. Maybe they are trying to contain something else. Science can explain toxic gas and unstable ground, but it cannot explain the feeling of being watched in an empty church, the sound of a party in a derelict house, or the suffocating weight of an unseen presence in a dusty room. In these places of intense human suffering, of lost homes, shattered health, and broken communities, a profound energy remains, a psychic wound that festers long after the people are gone. The government may be great at demolishing buildings and discontinuing zip codes, but they have no protocol for dealing with a haunting. They know trespassing, signs warn of physical dangers, but maybe they serve another purpose. Maybe they are there to keep us from confronting a truth we are not equipped to handle. That when you murder a town, you don't just create a ghost town. You create ghosts. These erased places are more than just footnotes in history. They are warnings. A stark reminder of what happens when profit is placed before people and when the secrets we bury refuse to stay dead. They show us that the past is never truly gone. It's just beneath the surface, smoldering, waiting. The question is, how many other Centralias are out there, burning quietly under our feet, waiting to be found?